I don't know how much coverage you've seen or read today of Donald Trump's ludicrous comments about the so-called Chagos Island deals. It's very unpopular with the usual sort of ignorant racists all over Twitter who don't understand anything or follow the facts or events. But you'd have thought on this occasion they might have actually double-checked what Donald Trump had to say about it at the time, or indeed what his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had to say about it all those many, many moons ago in... I don't like doing that, hashtag checks notes or whatever it is. But May of 2025, May the 22nd, 2025. So just lest you are confused about what is going on, Donald Trump has made his enmity towards Europe and the United Kingdom crystal clear. His designs upon sovereign European territory are now visible from space. You either abandon your pathetic, mealy-mouthed support for the man, or you erect ever more ludicrous facades of fraudulence and stupidity in order to mask your own sense of humiliation and shame at having backed such an obvious wrong-un, and of course having been so obnoxious and so rude to the people who were pointing out what was, to almost everybody honest, sensible and informed, blindingly obvious. So what he has done today is essentially hand weapons to useful idiots on this side of the Atlantic and say, please throw these at your own Prime Minister. Which means that the useful idiots on this side of the Atlantic throwing weapons at their own Prime Minister are latter-day Lord Haw-Haws. They are doing the bidding of a foreign leader who wishes us harm and ill. See it in the context of the United Kingdom, if you want, or see it in the context of Europe, which he has refused to rule out military force in the process of helping himself to land that he wants. So just because you might think that you're going mad, I will file this under...
Missed information.
Thank you, Emily. This is May the 22nd, 2025, and I'm mentioning it because apparently I'm the only person capable of remembering. Today, the United States welcomed the historic agreement between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Mauritius on the future of the British Indian Ocean Territory, specifically the Chagos Archipelago. We commend both the United Kingdom and Mauritius for their leadership, vision and commitment to ensure that Diego Garcia remains fully operational for the duration of the agreement. We look forward to working closely with both governments to strengthen our collaboration in support of regional peace and stability. Full stop. Signed, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Donald Trump's White House, May the 22nd, 2025. So why has he changed his course now? Answer: to get useful idiots to throw weapons at their own Prime Minister in acts of fairly obvious and blatant treachery. OK? I have found today, for your delectation, the single most unhinged headline that I have had the misfortune of stumbling across in all my time commenting on the news, let alone simply the time assembling unhinged headlines for your delectation. You sort of think of Lord Haw-Haw as a mythical figure. You think of those Daily Mail front pages, hurrah for the brown shirts, the deep admiration of Hitler and his inner Nazi circle that was displayed by the owner of that newspaper, the grandfather of the current owner. And you open the pages of that organ and some others today, and you see how it happened. You see how you had people in this country in the 1930s shilling for our enemies, cheerleading for our enemies, expressing explicit admiration and praise for our enemies, or indeed for the equivalents of our enemies, their allies in our midst. Where Oswald Mosley once walked, today Nigel Farage goose steps. And there it is. I mean, these echoes of history, these reflections of the past are absolutely crystal clear, unless you don't want to see them. And the problem we've got is that, imagine this was a show that relied upon experts to explain things to us. We do occasionally, and we're very lucky to have a wonderful stable of experts, some of whom ring us unprompted and some of whom we reach out to on occasions when we need insights. But you can't ring anyone today. You can't ring anyone today. That's not a criticism of colleagues who will, of course, book experts to talk about this, but there aren't any. There are no experts who have spent 20 years preparing for this moment or understanding this moment. When you talk to Fiona Hill about what Russia has done to destabilise the West, you're talking to an expert, but that's in the rearview mirror now. She would not have been prepared for a moment when Donald Trump set his sights upon sovereign European territory. There are no experts who have spent their lives either preparing for this moment or studying the possible ramifications of actions like this. The European Union is under attack from the United States of America. At the moment, the attack is political, rhetorical and economic. But when asked whether or not he would rule out the military, the President of the United States of America refused to reveal it. It's extraordinary. That is where we are today. The European Union, the European continent, forgive me, is under attack from a man whose motivation, by his own account, which you can't rely on, of course, seems largely to be a complete misunderstanding of how maps work and fury that he wasn't given a Nobel Peace Prize for as a reward for ending wars that he hasn't ended. That's where we are today. Find me the expert. You can find writers of fiction. Margaret Atwood probably would be able to provide us with some insights. George Orwell, were he still with us, would probably be able to provide us with some insights. Even Suzanne Collins would probably have a few things to say about how societies like this operate and how these people rise to the top. But there are no experts. There's nobody who can talk to you about, with depth and substance, about the tension, about the peril of a United States setting its sights on European allies while, and remember, this is part of the process of flooding the zone, but flooding the zone doesn't mean it's not happening, while inviting war criminals to join the Board of Peace for Gaza, while inviting Vladimir Putin, whose interference in Western politics played immeasurable parts in both putting Donald Trump in the White House and inflicting Brexit upon our population. He is inviting Vladimir Putin, currently embarked upon an illegal invasion of European territory, to join a, quote, Board of Peace, end quotes. There's no expert you can book to talk about, remind me of the last time that a US president was acting against the interests of Europe and cozying up to Russian dictators. Cozying up to a Russian war criminal. Remind me of the last time. What happens usually when an American president sets his sights on European territory, alienates and insults European allies, and cozies up to war criminals and dictators who are the obvious and sworn enemies of Western interests? Run me through what the playbook says about America abandoning its NATO responsibilities. Oh, hang on. When was the last time that an ally arrived in the White House and got insulted viciously by the President of the United States? When was the last time that happened on live television? When's the last time we stuck the cameras in front of that? All of this is true, by the way. None of this is opinion yet. If you're frightened by it or unnerved by it or slightly shocked by it, just take a moment to process. Everything I've said is simply true. Everything I've said is happening. He is refusing to rule out military action in Greenland. For the record, I don't think it will happen, but we'll get on to that. He is threatening, he is making war, both rhetorical, political and economic, against European allies. He is in the process of, or certainly looking likely to, completely abandon NATO responsibilities, and he is treating Vladimir Putin with much more respect and admiration than Volodymyr Zelensky, or for that matter, Keir Starmer, or Emmanuel Macron, let alone the Prime Minister of Norway, who he blames personally for the failure to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. There are no experts. It's extraordinary. And here's the thing about what I just said, my personal opinion that he is unlikely to deploy the military in Greenland, but I'm pretty sure I'd have said 2 months ago, or 6 months ago, he's unlikely to start blowing up boats in the sea with no evidence whatsoever that there are criminals aboard them. He's unlikely to start kidnapping foreign leaders and accusing them of drug trafficking while simultaneously pardoning another foreign leader from the same part of the world that has been convicted in an American court of drug trafficking. It's bonkers, right? There's no expert for that moment. We're joined now by the Professor of Jurisprudence from Harvard University. This has happened before, Prof, hasn't it? When was the last time an American president pardoned an international drug trafficker while also arresting and kidnapping an alleged international drug trafficker? So he's pardoning the convicted one and he's kidnapping the alleged one. How does this normally play out? Well, James, I gotta tell you, I ain't never seen anything like this before. I don't know quite where that accent came from, but do bear with me. Because it's never going to happen. Whether you've been pretty clear-eyed about how awful he is from the start, or whether you've been in danger of disappearing up his tailpipe, as many, many, many members of the UK media and political establishment have been, almost exactly the same ones that told you Brexit would be brilliant. Boris Johnson was a stand-up guy. Liz Truss was a financial genius. Austerity was a necessary measure. Almost all of the same people have been comforting, cheerleading, lauding Trump, and they now are reduced to either pretending or believing that there is a moment on the horizon when it will happen. Normality will be reimposed. He will back down. He will... the best essence of what I'm trying to describe is the people who would say, oh, don't worry about what he says, just focus on what he does. They don't say that anymore, because it was always a stupid thing to say. He does what he says he will do. He will do it if he thinks he can get away with it. In the first term, there were people in the White House, Fiona Hill among them, who would have stayed his hand. Also, some of the very, very senior members of administration who he has now turned on, like Henry VIII, because they would stay his hand. They would impose decency, or at least a semblance of decency or normality. They've gone. They've all gone. If he says it, he'll do it. He'll try to do it, and if he says he wants to do it, then he wants to do it. So I sit here now and say to you, with my fingers crossed behind my back, I don't think he'll deploy military force in Greenland, and I mean it. I don't think he will. But will he impose tariffs? Well, why wouldn't he? He's mad. He's definitely not mad. Oh, the lefties say. No one's really making that argument anymore, except the person responsible for the most unhinged headline in the history of unhinged headlines, which is resplendent in the Daily Mail newspaper today, and which I must remember to share with you before close of play. But there aren't any experts, because there aren't any precedents, and there isn't any reason. I say that again for my own benefit, not yours. There aren't any experts because there aren't any precedents, and there isn't any reason to unravel. You can't reason people out of positions that they haven't been reasoned into, but you can't reason your way through events that are entirely unreasonable. It's not even enough to chalk it up to Donald Trump's mental decline, to his narcissism, to his caprices, to his daddy issues. You can't even chalk it up to all of that, because, I mean, as the Chagos Islands stuff demonstrates today, he'll say one thing with his full chest on a Monday, and he can say the polar opposite on a Tuesday. And his cheerleaders and fans are reduced to going along with both of it. Both things. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Oh, no. So Farage today, here you go. The Americans have woken up to the fact that they were lied to. They were told that the UK had no choice but to surrender the Chagos Islands. This was simply not true, and now they are angry with us. That's a lie. That's a blatant and obvious, treacherous lie. Taking up the invitation of a foreign leader who wishes us ill to throw grenades, to throw abuse at our own Prime Minister in support of a foreign regime. It's not an exaggeration, it's a statement of fact. What Farage probably does know, but you don't, is that Brexit and Boris Johnson played a huge part in the run-up to the Chagos deal that the UK government had no choice but to sign. And as Donald Trump said, via Marco Rubio, his Secretary of State, we commend both the United Kingdom and Mauritius for their leadership, vision and commitment to ensure that Diego Garcia remains fully operational for the duration of this agreement. If you think you can trust Nigel Farage, just have a little look at some of the stuff he said about Brexit, or Boris Johnson, or Liz Truss. So there aren't any experts, which is a great opportunity for populists and liars, for the biggest fraudsters and grifters of all, because when the experts don't know what to do, the people who are full of passionate intensity but absolutely awful sometimes move into the vacuum that's created. And that's where we are now. It's not going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to suddenly be overcome by the parameters of normality. Donald Trump is not suddenly going to start abiding by the international rules-based order. Donald Trump is not going to wake up tomorrow and recognise the importance of NATO, because it's important to world peace, not to him. It's not going to happen. This thing that everybody thinks will eventually happen, whether you are clear-eyed about who Donald Trump is and always has been, or whether you've been clinging to the ludicrous delusion that he's anything other than a hideous monster, both personally and politically. But it's not going to happen. That moment when he steps back from the madness can't happen because the madness is the man. It's not going to happen. And do you know who is currently the biggest subscriber to the belief that it's going to happen? It's our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. There are criticisms galore to be made about him at the moment, but don't join in or don't accept the invitation from a foreign leader who wishes us harm to throw traitorous weapons at him when you can simply throw truth bombs. Keir Starmer is betting the house on Donald Trump reverting, reversing, revising. Keir Starmer is betting the house on it happening. The climb down, the reimposition of normality, the return to the status quo, the primacy of the rules-based international order. Keir Starmer is betting everything, and we haven't got much to bet, to be honest with you, and it doesn't really matter what he does. All eyes now are on Europe, but it doesn't really matter what he does. He's betting everything on Donald Trump changing. On Donald Trump not continuing to prove that he is all of the things he constantly proves himself to be. Deeply dishonest, morally bankrupt, utterly corrupt, by his own account amoral, by his own account a serial sex offender. All of the things that should be a liar on a scale that almost brought insurrection to the street. Well, it did bring attempted insurrection to the streets of the United States, to the streets of Washington. There are no superlatives. There is no hyperbole to describe how awful he is, as with all of the most awful people in history. Right back to the Roman Empire and beyond. We read books 100, 1,000 years later and marvel at how awful these people are, but we seem to divide when they're alive and ruling over us into people who can't see the wood for the trees and people who can't believe that everybody else can't see what's clear to them. There are no experts now, and it isn't going to happen. So what does Europe do? And I cannot see any scenario currently in which this is not the moment at which you abandon all hope that it's going to change and you act entirely in your own interests. So Europe now needs to come out against Donald Trump. Keir Starmer's involvement is probably irrelevant, which is a heartbreaking thing to say. It wouldn't have been without Brexit. And just look how quickly the people still clinging to the carcass of Brexit line up to amplify the interests of the foreign leader who wishes us harm. You think I'm exaggerating? Wait till you get to the most unhinged headline in history later in today's show. But what else does Europe do now but actually start treating the United States like an enemy and going all in the first instance on a trade war? Because the only language that bullies understand, and this is the closest you're going to get to expertise on a day like today, the only language that bullies understand is aggression. Whether or not we have the leaders, whether we have the people, whether or not we have the will, I do not know. I glance to my right, I see Ursula von der Leyen speaking, and under the headline, "Time to build a new independent Europe." But I've been hearing words a little bit like that ever since it became clear that Trump was going to abandon Ukrainian interests upon the altar of his admiration for Vladimir Putin. Now is the time. Now is the time to act as if, not as if, to act because the United States is our enemy. It's the enemy of Europe. It's the enemy of the United Kingdom. It's the enemy of anything that stands in the way of Donald Trump's insatiable insanity and greed. And I mean, how many times have we sat here and said, oh, well, that'll be it. That'll be the deal breaker. No one can hang on now. But here we are. That's my question for you. Ed Davey calling this morning for robust response. Yesterday I suggested it's easy to say that in opposition. It's much harder to do it in power. But as I look across the English Channel, as I look to the European Union, and as I listen to Donald Trump's increasingly unhinged, it gets ever more unhinged. It's not going to happen. It's not going to go into reverse. He's not going to be overcome by sanity. It's not going to succumb to the rules of reason and rationality suddenly. So what do? You've got now to push back. You have to fight fire with fire. You have to out-bully the bully, don't you? So who's right? That's the way it works as a phone-in, by the way. Keir Starmer still urging European allies not to bring out the bazooka, which is actually a phrase they use for a real trade instrument, while Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, is suggesting that now is the time to get the biggest guns of all out. So who's right, Ed Davey or Keir Starmer? Is now the time for Europe to stand up and tell Donald Trump what's what? To push back, to hurt their own citizens in pursuit of the greater good economically? Or do we sit here continuing, as Keir Starmer seems determined to do, hoping that he'll change, hoping that it will happen, hoping that normality will be restored, hoping that tomorrow he won't be quite as mad as he was yesterday?